Hi champs, welcome back again to all of you in the another Sunday live session. Okay, so today I'm excited to introduce our special guest, Professor Jaideep Prabhu, an eminent academic in the field of business and enterprise, who currently holds the position of professor at the University of Cambridge Business School. And Professor Prabhu is an expert in the field of innovation, particularly Jugaad and Frugal Innovation, and has authored several books on the subject, including Jugaad Innovation. His work has inspired many entrepreneurs and business leaders around the world to adopt a more innovative and sustainable approach to their businesses. We are privileged to have you, sir, in today's live session. Thank you so much, sir, for joining us.
Thank you, Ankit. It's my pleasure.
So, can we start the discussion?
Absolutely.
Okay. So, my first question is what inspired you to research and write about the concept of Jugaad innovation?
Great question to start. So, I grew up in India. I studied engineering as an undergraduate in Delhi. I then went to the US and I switched my studies from engineering to business. I got a PhD in marketing there. I taught in the US, I taught in the Netherlands, then moved to the UK to Cambridge. And as you said, throughout my career, I've studied innovation. In the first part of my career, I studied innovation in large Western companies. And then, maybe in about 2007 or so, I became very interested in innovation in emerging economies like India. I was particularly interested in how large Western companies were setting up, big R&D centers in cities like Bangalore and Hyderabad, Chennai, Gurgaon, etc. And so I went to study what these large multinationals were doing in these R&D centers. And actually, when I was there in talking to somebody in Cisco, a very famous scientist who had an engineer who had many patents, I said, "So what is Cisco doing in India? Why are you doing R&D in India?" And he said, "We are here to do Jugaad." And this was not an Indian guy, it's a foreign person. So I was a little surprised. I thought, maybe, is he pulling my leg? Is he serious? So I inquired, and then he said, yes, we see that in India, people have ingenious ways of doing more with limited resources. They can come up with highly affordable solutions to many problems. We think if we can develop these affordable solutions in areas like healthcare, we would have a big market in India, but also in other countries. And so that's how I became interested in Jugaad. I started looking at not only how large companies were doing it, but also startups, multinationals, but Indian companies, and also people in grassroots, in villages, etc. And that's how my co-authors and I came to write the book about Jugaad innovation.
Okay, so thank you so much. And the next question is how do you define the Jugaad and what is frugal innovation?
Yeah. So, we all in India know what Jugaad is, right? We practice it at some level all the time, maybe in our daily lives as consumers, in our work, even maybe in our personal context. Um, so, we are familiar with Jugaad. And, sometimes, of course, we have a negative view of Jugaad because it's about cutting corners. Maybe it's about poor quality. Maybe it's even sometimes unethical and so on. And so, we really wanted to understand what is the difference between Jugaad as such and Jugaad innovation. So, if you keep in mind, our book is called Jugaad Innovation. And the idea is that how can you take this Jugaad mindset, this ability to think laterally, to come up with really ingenious solutions, improvise sometimes to complex problems, to challenging situations, particularly those where you have limited resources. And so for us, Jugaad innovation is very much about how you can improvise in very harsh circumstances a good enough solution, not a perfect solution, but a good enough solution that importantly makes the best use of limited resources available in that context. And as you said, from there on we went on to study jugaad, not just in emerging markets like India but also in western economies. And of course in the west we call it frugal innovation. And really, what how I would define frugal innovation is like an extension of jugaad. It's basically how you would innovate faster, better, cheaper, how you would deliver more value to people by using fewer resources.
Right, right. The same thing I was reading in that book about the Mansukh who used the clay to make the refrigerator.
So yeah, Mansukh Bhai is a very good example, and we start our Jugaad book with his story. Comes from a village in Gujarat. He has a high school education. Comes from a family of potters, and in 2001 there was a very serious earthquake in his state in Gujarat. A lot of people lost their household possessions, including the matkas in which they store water. And he said that one morning he opened the local newspaper and there was a picture of someone's matka that was broken. And the caption read as a kind of joke, "Poor man's fridge broken." But that actually inspired him to design a poor man's fridge, which was a clay fridge, a box where the matka was in the top and you could drink that water. But in the bottom, there was a box where you could put fruit and vegetables. And when the water evaporated through the walls, it would drop the temperature by about 8 degrees Celsius in the hot, dry season. And it would keep fruit and vegetables fresh for up to 5 days. That's a great example to me of Jugaad, basically using the limited resources available in your context, clay, mitti, basically water, your skills, people in the village who he trained, like local women, to make the fridges in his factory. And then he can go on to sell them, including on the internet. So again, it's that idea. You very harsh circumstances, earthquake, vagera. You basically make the best use of your limited resources to come up with something that adds value to people's lives, but faster, better, and cheaper.
Yeah. So my next question is there any relation between the frugal innovation and Jugaad?
Yeah, yeah. So Jugaad is what we would call Jugaad innovation is what we wrote about in that book that you showed. That book was all about emerging countries, emerging markets like India. We had examples also from other Asian economies like China, some African economies, some Latin American economies, where you see similar conditions. So that book came out in 2012. It was all about emerging markets. Then we saw there was a lot of interest in the same kind of idea in the West for the West, and large companies were doing frugal innovation. So we wrote a follow up book called Frugal Innovation, which we focused on Western companies, particularly large companies, and how they were sometimes inspired by emerging markets, sometimes inspired by Western entrepreneurs to do things faster, better, cheaper. So there is a connection between Jugaad and frugal innovation. They're the same thing in a way. It's just that in India, we really understand what Jugaad is, and in the West, we call it frugal innovation.
Can we also say that do more with less is the frugal
Yeah.
innovation or the
So that's
Jugaad?
the basic idea underpinning both Jugaad and frugal innovation. It's an approach to doing more and better with less.
Okay. So come on the next question. Uh, According to you, is it good to have a frugal innovation or Jugaad innovation as a practical subject in Indian education?
Yeah, I mean, I think many of us, whether it's in the curriculum or not, we grow up learning about Jugaad. We have to do it, right? So in many cases, we'll face resource constraints. We face all kinds of constraints, and I guess because we learn from others, if we have Jugaadus in our environment, we learn from them. So I think one way or another, Indians are learning it, whether it's in the curriculum or not. But that said, I think it can be taught, and I don't think it should be taught as an abstract subject. It's not a question of, yes, if you want, you can read the book, you can watch videos, you can even do some lectures. But really, I think it's about practice, and this is where I think it can bringing it into the curriculum can really revolutionize how education is done in India. Indian education, like in many other countries, is still very kind of by the book. It's rote learning. बच्चे लोग स्कूल जाते हैं, पढ़ते हैं और रट्टे मारते हैं और फिर they just reproduce that in the in the
Exams.
exam. So that really is only a very basic type of education. What you really need more and more is to be able to create things yourself. That kind of ratna and reproducing in the exam, that is made obsolete today by Google and Chat GPT. Anyone can tell you what's in the textbooks. The question is, how can you apply that creatively? So, by having practical subjects where students are in groups given challenges to solve problems within constraints, to solve problems in their school environment, maybe to improve the outcomes of learning within a quicker time, shorter time, with less cost. Maybe to help make the best use of limited infrastructure in the school, how to improve infrastructure in the school, how to improve the surroundings of the school, how to help children who have lower incomes, families who are lower incomes, or who have difficult homes. Um, there are many such problems that children in schools could help address with the help of their teachers, of course. But it should be practical, where they are given a challenge and then in groups they apply these principles to come up with actual solutions which they can test, maybe even prototypes. Maybe they can come up with some app, maybe they can come up with some physical product, and they can test it and they can evaluate it. And if some of those solutions are seen to work, they can be scaled in some way. They can maybe even be commercialized or shared with other schools. So I really believe that can revolutionize how education is done in India. And of course, it would tap into something that all Indians are used to and all Indians know, which is this Jugaad mindset.
Right. Okay. So whenever I and most of the people think about the Jugaad, it's like a temporary solution, like a plan B or using some idea to fix it at the last moment. So is Jugaad good or bad? Your thoughts on that?
Great question. And as I was saying, when we started to study systematically Jugaad, of course, it has a negative. There is a strong negative impression, or connotation, for because, as you said, it's a plan B or it's a quick fix solution. It's not necessarily solving a deep underlying problem, right? It is solving maybe a more immediate problem with a more immediate solution. But first of all, those solutions are already important. If you have no, for instance, access or you cannot afford telecoms, then you use a missed call, right? You cannot If you cannot afford to pay for a call, you use missed call, right? So that's a clever jugaad. It's a clever way to solve a problem that you have. You need to communicate to someone, but you can't afford to pay for the call. So you give a missed call and you send a signal that way. So there are many situations when you need a plan B, because the plan A is not working, right? And so I think there are many such situations where Jugaad helps. But even when you want to do it more systematically, when you want to try and solve a deeper problem, right? And if that's where innovation comes in, let's say you want to create some kind of a digital payment system, let's say through using a mobile phone, like through text messaging. Vodafone, introduced something called M-Pesa, which was later on introduced into India too, in Kenya in 2008. And actually, they got the inspiration for that. That is, basically, people could make micro payments to each other from their phones, like a text message, sending basically some monetary value, right? Which they could also cash in an M-Pesa agent by texting the electronic money and getting cash back. The Vodafone people got the inspiration for that idea from people in a slum in Nairobi who were doing a jugaad. Basically, they had figured out if they have excess minutes on their plan, they can exchange some of those excess minutes with somebody else as a kind of payment. And so the Vodafone people saw that Jugaad, and then they got inspired by it to create M-Pesa, which was a system that enabled anyone in Kenya to exchange money. If somebody son is working in Nairobi, the mother can call the son from the village, ask him to text money home to her. She gets it on her phone immediately. She goes to the local kirana shop, which is the M-Pesa agent, and cashes the money. So, yes, often it's a plan B. Plan B itself is sometimes important to solve, but in many cases can then be an inspiration for a plan A.
Yeah. So the next one is, what role do you see Jugaad playing in the future of global innovation?
So I think what we have seen is like a kind of three phases, from my own research with my co-authors. The first phase was like in the 2000s, from say 2000 to 2010, where we saw a lot of these kinds of frugal innovations happening in emerging economies, countries like India, China, African economies. A lot of it is mobile phone based. So mobile phones were taking off, which were very affordable themselves. The mobile devices from say Nokia were frugal innovations themselves. Then we saw business model innovations, let's say from Airtel, where they would figure out how somebody could just with a scratch card of 5 rupees get minutes and start to make calls from their phone. So we saw a lot of frugal innovation happening in emerging markets in the 2000s. A lot of jugaads like M-Pesa, which were becoming widespread, helping bringing people who are outside the formal economy into the formal economy. And then we wrote that Jugaad Innovation book based on that. But then in the 2000s, we started to see, 2010s, we started to see this spreading to the West. That in Western countries, even large corporations, because of the experience in emerging markets, because of what entrepreneurs were able to do with digital technologies, you had all these digital manufacturing tools like 3D printers, laser cutters, all these kinds of things. You had also, of course, social media. You had crowdfunding, all these kinds of revolutions taking place, which were enabling even large companies to innovate faster, better, and cheaper in the West. Plus, of course, thinking about climate change and circular economy. So there was another phase of what was happening in the West. And now I think we're at a point where East and West, North and South are kind of colliding in this space, the frugal innovation space, because a lot of the approaches which were started and originated in emerging markets have spread to the West. Some of the technologies that started in the West have spread to emerging markets. So now I think really we have a kind of global ecosystem, global approach to frugal innovation, where sometimes the frugal innovations are being done in emerging markets and then spreading to the Western world. Other cases, the frugal innovations are being done in the Western world and spreading to emerging markets.
Okay. So the next one is, how is Jugaad relevant to the Indian society?
See, I think Jugaad is very fundamental to the Indian society. So, in our second book, which we wrote, which was about Western countries, what we had noticed was that in Western countries, this kind of frugal economy was being driven by a group of consumers we call prosumers, because these were not passive recipients of products and services. They were more proactive, they were more actively involved in the socio-economic process, and they were driving three movements that underpin a frugal economy. One is the sharing economy, where now you and I can directly trade some spare asset on a digital platform like Airbnb. If you have a room to spare in your hometown and I'm visiting your hometown, you can put it on Airbnb, I can rent it from you, and likewise. So there's the sharing economy. Then we have the maker movement. This is where small teams, sometimes of our students, they can do things that only large companies or the government could have done 10 or 20 years ago, and not only in software, but even in hardware. So there's making. And then third, there's the circular economy, because we are thinking about climate change. We are thinking about preserving assets. So we are always looking to reduce, reuse, and recycle all the resources that go into production and consumption. Now, that's what we found in the West. But then we realized that that is very deep in Indian society and the Indian economy. All those three things: sharing, When I was growing up in India, we used to share lots of things: school books, even school uniforms, toys, games, bikes. All these things we would share. So resources would be shared. Then making. We used to make our own toys sometimes. We used to make our own, entertainment. And of course, traditionally, if you look, particularly in rural India, you have many communities who are very good at making with wood or with cloths, with textiles, with metal. So we have that making tradition in India. And finally, circular economy. We are very good at reducing, reusing, and recycling. Like even our at home, we would do this. Reusing bottles and tins and cans and plastic and so on. So I think India has these very deeply rooted, but now we also have the opportunity to use 21st century tools to help us in this. We have digital platforms for sharing, we have sophisticated these technologies like Industry 4.0, digital manufacturing tools to help us make. Uh, and we are, a lot of circular economy principles are coming in, recycling and so on. So I think Jugaad is very fundamental and to India, and I think we can tap into our traditional kind of practices and ethos, but also use new technologies to really, in a way, lead the world in this space of frugal innovation.
Okay. The next one is, how can educators and policymakers incorporate Jugaad principles into their Indian education system?
Yeah, so I think we sort of touched on this earlier. I think we should be thinking about making our education system much more practical, creative solutions, or problem and solution oriented, rather than book learning only. I'm not saying that we shouldn't learn what's in books and also be able to reproduce that in tests. That is okay. You need that up to a point, but beyond a point, that can't be the only thing you do in education. You have to give people skills, creativity skills, entrepreneurial skills, communication skills, teamwork skills. These are things that employers are looking for today, and it's going to get even more so with the rise of AI and robotics. As computers and computerized technologies will do more and more of the basic things that humans have done, we as humans will have to do things that we as humans are uniquely designed to do, which is to create, innovate, to be entrepreneurial, to identify new types of problems and new types of solutions.
Right.
So I think our education system needs to bring more of those kinds of activities, more opportunities for young people to practice that kind of practical learning and knowledge and apply it. And like we were saying, we can have subjects in school where students are challenged to come up with solutions to problems they see in their own environment, and test them, document them, and then maybe even help to scale them. As an example, in Stanford University, there is an entire course called Design for Extreme Affordability. And the whole objective of the course is the students in their groups have to come up with a working prototype, which is a solution that's 100th the cost of the existing solution to any problem. The students can choose any problem. That's it. They don't have to take any exams. They don't have to study. I mean, there's some lectures and so on, but the key thing is they have to come up with a problem they want to solve, and then they have to come up with a prototype solution which is 100th the cost of the existing solution. So that's quite a challenging thing, but that's what they spend the semester working on.
Yeah, absolutely. So, finally, my last question is, what advice would you give to the students, educators, and maker spaces who are interested to adopting a Jugaad approaches to education in India?
So I think if you are already interested in doing this, if you know about makerspaces, if you have access to them, of course, in India we call them adult tinkering labs, but you also have
Right.
fab labs, make spaces, makers asylums. You have all kinds of these workshops and spaces, community spaces. If you have access to them, please go to them, see what people are doing there, see what's possible, join those communities. I think increasingly schools have these adult tinkering labs. Uh, Go and check them out. If your school doesn't have one, ask your principal, head teachers to get one, because the government has supported the development of these. And then get your teachers to start giving you in your curriculum, as part of your school day or school week or school year, some systematic opportunities to identify problems in your community, in your school, and then some way in your groups to try and solve those problems, coming up with solutions. As I said, these could be prototype apps. You can develop software that tries to solve a problem. For instance, tracking waste in a school, or tracking the inventory of stationery in the school, helping procure that in a more affordable way for the school, reducing waste, as I said. So you can have apps, but you can also have like actual solutions, like you can design maybe Internet of Things prototypes to help with some part of the school administration or even education. You can develop ed tech solutions. So there are so many possibilities, so many opportunities. And I would really strongly encourage all your listeners, all the young people in India, to really explore these ways of innovating frugally, because I really believe that will be the distinction. That is how you will differentiate yourself in the job market. If you're trying to get a job in a company, or if you want to be an entrepreneur, those are great skills to have to be an entrepreneur. If you can design your own prototype solutions, then that's half of being a successful entrepreneur.
Yeah, okay. So with this, we're going to end this session, and thank you so much, sir, for your valuable time and insight. Your knowledge and expertise in the field of frugal innovation and Jugaad have been truly inspiring.
Thank
So
you,
we are
Ankit. It's
grateful
been
for the opportunity to learn from you. Thank you so much, sir.
thank you, Ankit. It's been my pleasure. Thank you very much. I hope your listeners have enjoyed this, and please do give me the feedback that you hear from them.
Yeah, sure. Okay,
Thank you,
thank you
and
so much.
bye.